Good morning, everybody. It is very nice to see you all. C'est un plaisir d'être de retour. I hope everybody had a wonderful summer at home with friends, family, and constituents. We have a lot ahead of us in terms of what's to come, but we've got some business to tend to right off the bat. So I'm calling to order meeting 122 of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. Friendly reminder, as we've been away for a little bit, to please, for the benefit of our interpreters who are working hard on our behalf, make sure that your headsets are on the sticker that's been provided in front of you in order to avoid harmful feedback and other obstructions. So I'm going to just give a very brief explanation of where we are, why we are where we are, and kind of what we need to do to move forward. So Madame Matheson had put forward, as you may recall, a motion that we did not deal with in terms of what next steps would be at the end of our last meeting. So we were suspended at the end of that meeting. So we have to get back into the conversation on Ms. Matheson's motion. However, there's a small technicality we have to deal with. That is that due to a date that is now in the past that has been, that was inserted in Ms. Matheson's motion, there's an admissibility issue. I have spoken with all parties and members in relation to this, and I believe I'm seeing that Ms. Matheson would like to speak to it, and we'll see what you have to say, Ms. Matheson, and that may very well get us moving this morning. So I turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, and welcome back, everybody. Hope everyone had a good summer. What I would like to do, just to make it, I guess, to clear things up in terms of this motion, is ask for unanimous consent to change the wording around that date. So in Part 2, it will go on to read, these redacted documents be deposited as soon as possible, or 30 days after the passing of the motion. And then it would continue on so that whenever we pass this motion, we won't have to continually change it.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Matheson. So just to explain to everybody what this means, Ms. Matheson has asked for unanimous consent to change the wording in relation to the date. Should that be accepted, we will then resume debate on her motion as amended. So I am looking around the room for unanimous consent. Are there any objections? Okay, so we have amended the motion to read as it did with the changes that Ms. Matheson just presented. With that, Ms. Matheson, the floor remains yours if you'd like it, but I do see Mr. Calkins would like to speak. Just one moment, Mr. Calkins. Ms. Matheson, anything to add?
No, I think that we should go back to
our discussion. Okay, Mr. Calkins.
I believe Ms. Matheson offered the committee two options for the edit. Which one did the committee accept?
I believe it was the 30 days, but for clarity, just looking around, yeah, that's how I interpreted it. But Mr. Calkins, appreciate the clarification. Does that work for everybody?
That's what I assumed, but
yeah. Okay, good. All right. So with that, the floor is open, colleagues, to continue the discussion on Ms. Matheson's motion. Okay, I think what I'm going to do, colleagues, is I'm just going to very briefly suspend so that colleagues can have an opportunity to speak to each other about where we would like this to go. We do have a motion that is live in front of us. Okay. Okay, there's no speakers. Debate is collapsed. Okay, just in the future, colleagues, verbalize your intentions for me, please. It helps for me to know. Well, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. Okay. Madam Clerk, I'll ask you to call the question, please. So, colleagues, just for clarity here, we are voting on the motion here as amended. So,
Why are we? No. Call a question.
Mr. Garrettson?
No, the
Vote has started. Let's vote.
Mr. Garrettson?
You have the authority to suspend the meeting. I would ask.
Order.
I would ask
Point of
for
order.
a couple minutes just to. There seems to be some confusion, so I wouldn't mind just talking to my colleagues about that, if that's
Point of order,
okay.
Mr. Speaker.
How's the lawsuit going, Mark? Hold on.
Thank you, Mr. Garrettson. Mr. Cooper, it's our first meeting. I would appreciate if we could try to keep things collegial. Mr. Berthoud?
Monsieur
Tu
le
veux
Président,
répondre?
je vous demanderai de consulter la graphique.
Chair, you asked the clerk to call the question, so we need to immediately proceed to a vote. I think that the clerk must do her work and call the vote.
Donnez-moi un moment.
1 moment, please.
Okay, colleagues, I did call the question, so we are going to have to proceed to a vote. Colleagues, if you could take your seats, please. Allez-y.
Okay.
Oui.
You may proceed.
On the motion of Ms. Matheson as amended, Mr. Duguid.
No.
Madame Fortier.
No.
Mr. Garrettson.
No.
Mr. Turnbull. Mrs. Romanado.
No.
Monsieur Berthold.
Oui.
Mr. Calkins.
Yes.
Mr. Cooper.
Yes.
Mr. Duncan.
Yes.
Madame Gaudreau. No. Miss Matheson.
Yes. Wow.
Motion. Like to.
Okay, colleagues, so the vote is 5 yeas and 6 nays, which means that the motion is defeated.
Unbelievable. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Cooper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move a motion that is on notice, and that is, and I'll read it into the record just so that all members are familiar with the motion that has been put on notice, and that is that the committee invite the Minister of Public Safety, Democratic Institutions, and Intergovernmental Affairs to appear before the committee for no less than 2 hours within 14 days of the adoption of this motion in relation to his priorities for the return of Parliament and his mandate. And I will make some comments, but I recognize you might want to just allow members some time to
Yeah,
pull
thank
up the
you.
motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper. You had put said notice on motion, and therefore it is admissible to be debated now. And therefore, colleagues, we begin a debate on the motion that Mr. Cooper has put forward. Mr. Cooper has asked to retain the floor to provide some commentary, and I'm going to allow him the opportunity to do that now. Mr. Cooper, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will be very brief. I think it is important that at the start of this fall sitting that we hear from the minister. There are a number of matters before this committee that I think that we are dealing with, in which hearing from the minister would be important, including with respect to questions around the elections bill, as well as with respect to issues around foreign interference, including with respect to the implementation of the Foreign Influence Registry, as well as issues around disclosure of documents to Madam Justice Hogg's inquiry and other matters. So with that, I would hope that members would be supportive of inviting the minister to come before our committee.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Madame Gaudreau.
Bon retour à tous.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope that we're going to get some good weather for a long time, Chair, because I think that we're going to have a lot to do this fall. I'm going to give you what I think about this currently. I believe that inviting the minister to get his temperature on the issue, yes, with regard to elections, with regard to the vitality of our democracy, questions of privilege, I agree with that. However, Chair, we need to have constructive dialogue. And I hope today that in our deliberations we can talk like adults, and we can vote, and that we can, Chair, look at our schedule of the weeks to come. I care a lot about the work that we're doing. So if every colleague wants to speak, by all means, speak for 2 minutes, but I hope that we can move our work forward in order to get a good, clear schedule. And I would like to take this opportunity to welcome our new clerk. I'm thinking of you. And I do hope that you will interrupt us when necessary, because a lot of things are happening in this committee, but there will be a need for foreseeability for the work to come. Thank you.
Where's yours?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to echo not only the comments that are made by my colleague, Mr. Cooper, but you know, we've all been back in our ridings. I only know what I've heard from talking with my constituents, and there is some significant concern, I think, with the matter of foreign interference and the NSICOP report. I think this committee tried to wash its hands of the notion of having a conversation about whether or not this Parliament is compromised. And we shuffled that off to Madame Hogg's commission. She has since come out very publicly suggesting that that it's not within her mandate in order to discuss this. And I'm concerned. I'm not suggesting that we're going to pursue this, but I think the Canadian public's going to pursue it whether we want to or not. So I would be very much interested in hearing what the minister has planned insofar as reassuring the Canadian public about the integrity not only of this Parliament, but of course the integrity of our elections going forward, and making sure that we don't have these kinds of shadows arising over top of the next Parliament, whenever that happens to be. I think there's some important discussions that we need to have along that vein, and I will be supporting, because that's what I've heard from my constituents, I'll be supporting Mr. Cooper's motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Calkins. I have Ms. Romanato, followed by Madame Fortier, followed by Mr. Cooper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and it's great to be back in PROC. So I know that when we last met, the minister was actually here at PROC. And so I know we also have some legislation coming up that we have to study, I think C-65 and MP Ruff's Bill C-377, I believe. And I would assume the minister will be invited to speak on those pieces of legislation. So I know that we're going to have to see him when we're doing that. And I'm wondering if maybe that could be something that we can, in addition, when he's here, have him speak to this motion. So I'm just, because we have a lot on the schedule to do this fall, I wonder if maybe we can kill two birds with one stone when he comes to appear for these pieces of legislation.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Romanado. Madame Fortier.
Oui, je veux pas répéter ce que
I don't want to repeat what my colleague just said, but I do sincerely believe that we need to look at all the work the committee has before it. We have a busy, busy schedule ahead of us. It would probably be best to welcome the minister in other circumstances instead of going ahead with this motion. I am seeing already that time is going by quickly here, so we might have some unexpected things that could arise, so I would prefer not going forward with this motion, but rather looking at the committee's schedule to ensure that we can get everything we need to get done, because we do have a lot of things to do. So I would focus on committee deliberations. Thank you, Ms. Fatsi.
Very much, Mr. Chair, and look, we do have a lot to get done, and this motion simply provides for the minister to appear for one meeting, 2 hours. That hardly pushes back our schedule. In fact, I would submit it might, in fact, help move our schedule forward by probing the minister on certain matters that are seized before this committee. Yes, the minister will appear on Bill C-65, otherwise known as the Loser Liberal Pension Protection Act, but that might not be for several weeks from now. And in the meantime, we have a minister who has a lot to answer for on matters relating to the government's continued obstruction of Madam Justice Hogg's inquiry by refusing to turn over documents, the steps that the government has taken with respect to countering foreign interference with the passage of Bill C-70, which we fully supported, and it called on the government long to pass with respect to a foreign influence registry, and the failure or refusal of the minister to name the compromised members of Parliament, as well as his refusal when I put it to him at the Public Safety Committee in June, whether he could provide the assurance that not one of the 11 sit in Justin Trudeau's cabinet. He refused to answer that straightforward question, which is very telling. All of these issues are pressing, and they fall within the broader study that we have been undertaking on foreign interference, which ties in as well to the question of privilege that is before this committee that takes precedent over all other matters. So for all of those reasons, I think it is important that we have the opportunity as a committee to probe the minister, not just on the Loser Liberal Pension Protection Act, but on many of these other issues relating to foreign interference, the government's continued obstruction, and efforts to cover up what the Prime Minister knew and who is compromised in his caucus and in his cabinet.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Mr. Turnbull.
Well, it's really great to be back on PROC, Chair. I am very much enjoying the start to this fall session, and I was very grateful for my House Leader and Whip's office for inviting me back to my favorite committee in Parliament. It's good to see all my colleagues again. I was here when we studied foreign interference for quite a number of months. I think it was about 8 or 9 months, if I'm not mistaken. You know, I'm very, very interested in the topic, very concerned for our democracy. So I share some of the, I think, the intentions and commitment that other colleagues on this committee probably have with wanting to protect our democracy from any electoral interference. But that's specifically what C-65 is actually written for. It actually has multiple purposes, but within the intentions of the bill, that bill being called the Electoral Participation Act, despite the sloganeering from the Conservatives, which is quite amusing sometimes. It's also a bit misleading to call it whatever that term was that.
Peu importe le terme employé par les conservateurs, je ne le répéterai pas, mais tout cet article de la loi, du projet de loi.
On n'avait pas été allumé de
The interpreter's button wasn't pressed on.
Une phrase.
I don't want to miss a sentence here.
Pouvez-vous recommencer?
Can you please restart?
Au début, Madame Gaudreau, ou,
From the start, Ms. Gaudreau? Do you want a summary? 10 seconds, please.
just if you could kind of go back about 10 seconds or so that Madame Gaudreau and others listening in French can get the accurate review of what you said. Thank you.
I'll rewind and replay. So I was just about to say that, or I was saying that the electoral integrity and foreign interference, combating foreign interference, is actually part of C-65. So assuming that, as is standard practice, that ministers and their department officials come to committee at the outset of a study of a piece of government legislation, certainly I'm making the argument that I don't see the need to have Minister LeBlanc, one of my favorite ministers, by the way. I think he's fantastic at committee. So there's no attempt here for us to suggest that he wouldn't want to be here or wouldn't want to come to committee to answer questions. He's been here many times, as you know, and is more than capable of answering the tough questions from opposition members, which I fully expect will always be the case when a minister comes before a committee. But let's just be honest here. This bill, C-65, deals with the very issues that the members have expressed interest in questioning the minister on. So why don't we, just focus on the fact that the minister will be appearing already at least once, if not twice, with the two pieces of legislation that relate to his portfolio, and just be satisfied that all of us will have a chance to ask Minister LeBlanc the tough questions on electoral integrity and foreign interference that the opposition parties have expressed that they have. I think that's more than fair. I think it makes sense. So I see no need for this particular motion, given what we know is likely the schedule for this fall. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Turnbull. Madame Gaudreau, followed by Mr. Duncan, followed by Mr. Garretson.
Monsieur le Président.
Chair, we are already talking about scheduling our work. So let's be a little constructive here. Everyone can smile around the table, but I will not let this go. Let's find a way. Let's find a way to have the 2 hours, as stipulated by the motion, to fold in Bill C-65, and we'll have a lovely conversation. The Director General of Elections should be there, and so let's be efficient here with our time. I can vote for the motion just as long as we look at the schedule. We can make a minor amendment to fold this meeting into into the meetings on Bill C-65. I'm very open to this, but I want to stand firm here. I think today we should leave with an idea of what our schedule will be. Thank you for your comments, Ms. Gaudreau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To build on what's been said about Mr. Cooper's motion and to refute some of the brushing off, frankly, again, the obstruction of having the minister come back to committee urgently, as the motion states, not when we get to C-65 and gets into rounds about the bill. It is asking the minister to appear within the next 2 weeks. This meeting is actually continuing, as you mentioned at the beginning, a suspension of our last meeting we had in June where the minister was here, and the minister was brought here to discuss regarding document production for the commission and the work that Justice Hogue is doing. This is timely, this is urgent, and this is necessary because the very conversation we had on that topic about don't take my word or our word for it, but the justice's words herself and her team of the inquiry that say, quote, and this is just from the last week. From there is, quote, discussions with the government on document production remain ongoing. Remain ongoing. The last part of the hearing just started again. We're in the midst of this. We can't sit and wait for some theoretical, let's get a full calendar, the minister will appear at some point. No, the minister must come to this committee within the next 2 weeks. It is urgent because this issue specifically, among others that have been already raised, time is of the essence. And there should be no reason when we have this inquiry going on, when we have Justice Hogue and her team saying that the document production is still not resolved and the latest round of hearings are ongoing, This is not acceptable of what the Liberals are trying to do. Oh, we'll have the minister at some point down the road and we can ask him all different types of questions about C-65. And I will note, Canadians know what C-65 is, and that is a deliberate attempt to move back the election date a week so NDP and Liberal MPs that are going to lose their seat in the election can guarantee to get their pension vested. Millions of Canadians were disgusted at that attempt. So again, to go and say this is going to be some wonderful legislation supported by Canadians, they're disgusted at the games that the NDP and Liberals tried to do by putting that in there. They saw right through it. We'll get to that at some point this fall, I know. But again, for the motion that's at hand, in Mr. Turnbull's innocence of, oh, well, you know, the minister might come down at that point, we can ask some broad questions. No. Our motion has the minister appearing here within the next 2 weeks. It's necessary, and again, it is timely, colleagues, and there should be no reason. There is a major, major issue with the inquiry currently underway again this fall, the latest round of hearings, and that Justice Hogue does not have all the documents that they are requesting. So I support this motion. All colleagues should support this motion. And we can have the minister at the table to answer those questions. We asked in June. They said everything was fine. Don't worry about it. We're going to give all the. We gave everything that they deemed to be necessary, in their own opinion, not in Justice Hogue's, in the inquiry's work there. So they deserve to have this. They deserve to have the minister here. We deserve to have the opportunity to ask questions and get to the bottom of this so that the integrity of what's happening in that work is maintained. Because to have this large cloud hang over the work that's being done on this important topic to block the vitality of our democracy, agreed. But if the Liberal cabinet can hold back and make redactions of documents that Justice Hogue deems not appropriate, not right, and not reasonable, to have that overhang as the work goes, let's have the minister here, let's get to the bottom of this, and let's get full transparency in all of this. There's no reason. When all the work over the course of the fall, the Minister of Public Safety being here to answer questions is reasonable, and I think a very good start to answering a lot of questions that he has to account for.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Mr. Gerritsen, followed by Madame Gaudreau.
I mean, the issue here is that there's new information that's evolving all the time that we want to be reactive in order to ask questions about. And so Conservatives have some information now that they're reacting to because they want to be able to ask questions about this. But there's new details that are emerging every day. For example, I will read to you from Sam Cooper, a big someone who the Conservatives are really, really big fans of in terms of his reporting. This is what he reported yesterday. In explosive testimony before the Hogue Commission, former Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole revealed serious concerns about a Conservative senator allegedly promoting the interests of a Chinese state-owned enterprise in Ontario. O'Toole said a sitting MP had alerted him about the senator's lobbying for economic interests linked to China, sparking concerns about potential foreign interference. O'Toole testified that he considered removing the senator from caucus but faced significant challenges. Later on, Mr. Cooper goes on to report a classified source has also alleged to the Bureau that the senator in question was assessed by CSIS as a key actor in a Chinese election interference network in Toronto, which allegedly implicated at least 11 federal candidates from both major parties in the 2019 election. My point here is that, yeah, I got a lot of questions too. I got questions about this. And I don't want to jump the gun by calling the minister here when more information could come out. Hogue has to finish her work, and the work is due by the end of this year. A lot more information could come forward, potentially explosive information like this that I too would have questions. Now, do we want to call the minister here every time that something like this comes to light? Or do we want to let Hogue finish the work, let all of the details come to light, and then have a conversation about it? I think the latter is the more appropriate way to do it. Let's get all the information so that everything can come to light before we start jumping the gun, calling the minister here to answer for a partial or a piece of testimony that happened to be heard on one day. Because as I just indicated, there's a lot of testimony, and I believe that there's a lot more to come that we're going to learn about.
Thank you, Mr. Gerritsen. Madame Gautreau.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. My Liberal colleagues are not in disagreement with inviting the minister, so there is a point in common here. Now, we also have a motion here, and the Conservatives are clearly sticking to their guns on this one. You know my position. Just read this out. 14 days following the adoption of this motion in relation to his priorities for the return of Parliament. The return of Parliament has already occurred. We already have C65, and we need to design our schedule now. I can't vote against this. So I would like to hear my colleague, Ms. Matheson, talk about what her opinion on all this is. And I would ask my colleagues to not sign up for speaking, and so we proceed to a vote immediately.
Well, Mr. Gerritsen tried there to make the case, but I think he made the case for supporting having the minister come here in the next 14 days. He just passing all of his comments of what he said all over the place there. Well, just let the justice finish her work.
It's being impeded.
Yes, it's being impeded. It's absolutely correct. The reason the minister needs to come is that the minister was here at our last meeting and at the table because the commission, they're not getting all the documents that they are requesting. So here we are again. Just let them finish. They always do this. They stall and they obstruct. They try to make it look innocent. Oh, don't worry about it. We'll have them down later. And they always play these games. Canadians don't trust them. Another perfect example of what's happening right here. They are stalling and stalling and stalling. We had this meeting with the minister in June. And then what they do is they quietly did an order in council and passed a few more documents on. They wouldn't even say how many documents were there. But at the end of the day, here's the part, Mr. Chair, that matters the most. And Mr. Gerritsen just leaves out, let them finish their work. We agree. Let them finish their work with all the documents that they deserve and want and should have. Hearings are underway just less than a kilometer away from this committee room, probably a few hundred feet, if you're getting quite technical, underway as we speak. And they still don't have. It says right in the article, we're going to quote journalists and what they're saying. I'm happy to do the same and make the same argument Mr. Gerritsen's making. We should have the minister in 2 weeks because they should be finishing their work, and they should be finishing their work with everything they have. It says right here, quote, the order does not specify how many additional documents will be released to the inquiry or how many redactions will be lifted, but 4 months after the publication of her report and even after the government's latest release, Hogue is still pushing for more records. In a statement, PCO didn't even confirm all of this. And again, from the same article, if he wants to quote, and again, supporting our argument to get the minister here immediately and with urgency, it says right from the same article, National Post, quote, but national review agencies and observers are increasingly concerned that the government is constantly expanding its definition of what is cabinet confidence to prevent the disclosure of certain information. In interviews, 2 national security academics say the government's latest release order is very narrow and unlikely to provide all the information Hogue is seeking. And it says right in the same article, what's being released now is, quote, a very narrow window in a much broader range of intelligence reporting, and it's not the most important window either. So this is what they try to do. Kick the can. Oh, yes, we'll have the minister down at some point about the C65 and the bill that's there, and we'll ask some general questions. No. The minister needs to be here in the next 2 weeks answering questions on this and getting this issue solved. The integrity of the work that Justice Hogue is doing is on the line. If it's things hanging over months after our last hearing in June in Parliament, still hanging over here and not resolved, still not satisfied, and here you have Mr. Turnbull and Mr. Oh, don't worry, just let her do her work. We agree. Let her do her work by providing everything she deserves to have and needs to have, all the documents that she deserves to have of what she deems reasonable to see, not what the government deems reasonable for her to see, and do a review of their very own actions, or in many cases, inactions, when it comes to foreign interference. So I appreciate Mr. Gerritson's intervention. I hope he has more, because every time he does, he makes the argument of why the minister should be here within 2 weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Mr. Turnbull, followed by Mr. Calkins.
Thank you, Chair. God, I have a lot to say about this. So I look forward to future conversations. But I think I've already made the case for why and how we know that Minister LeBlanc will be coming to committee already as a part of our studies that we have and bills, including government legislation, which, as we know, should take priority. And we all know that Conservatives will always say we're masters of our own domain, which we are, but government legislation should take priority in many cases on committees. So, Minister LeBlanc will certainly, I'm sure, attend the study of C-65, which is a great bill that deals with foreign interference and electoral integrity. So I'd like to propose an amendment to Mr. Cooper's motion. So I'll read it into the record, that the committee invite the Minister of Public Safety, Democratic Institutions and Intergovernmental Affairs to appear before the committee for no less than 1 hour in relation to his priorities for the return of Parliament and his mandate as part of the study of Bill C-65. Thanks, Chair.
Just before we enter into debate on the amendment proposed by Mr. Turnbull, did everybody catch that en français ou non? OK. Madame Gaudreau, avez-vous besoin d'une copie en français ou? Oui? Okay. So, colleagues, until Madame Gaudreau, who I'm not sure was in her seat exactly at the moment that was introduced, she does have to have an opportunity to see this. Madame Gaudreau, est-ce que c'est...
Ms. Gaudreau, is it okay if he just repeats it and we can work with it before having something written in French? Is that okay? If my colleague speaks very slowly and we get it afterwards, then yes, no problem.
If you can just...
Point of order.
Oui, Monsieur Berthold.
Merci. J'aimerais que vous...
Yes, Mr. Berthold. There's a question that you asked Madame Gaudreau, but as a Francophone MP for Quebec, I also have the right to have access to documents and motions in French. And I would like you to not only ask Bloc MPs if you're going to take the time to ask to consult with Francophone MPs. Yes, you are correct, Mr. Berton. The reason why I asked Ms. Gaudreau is because Ms. Gaudreau said there was a problem. You did not say from the outset that there was a problem, but I understand, I respect the fact that there are a number of Francophone MPs on this committee. And going forward, we will ensure that everyone can work in both official languages. It's really just for that select reason that I didn't ask you a question on that regard.
Just please slowly reread your amendment. And in the future, colleagues, I would ask that for all members, we do our best when we know we're going to propose an amendment, that as the amendment is being read in, that somebody on your team is doing their best to translate that into the other language so that we don't lose efficiency at the table, just as a matter of general practice. Mr. Turnbull, if you could just repeat the amendment, please.
I'd be happy to, and my apologies for reading it so quickly into the record. So I'll start from the top, that the committee invite the Minister of Public Safety, Democratic Institutions, and Intergovernmental Affairs to appear before the committee for no less than 1 hour in relation to his priorities for the return of Parliament and his mandate as part of the study of Bill C-65. Now, I will just maybe summarize. It's changing from 2 hours to 1 hour, removing the within 14 days, and adding as part of the study of Bill C-65, which is consistent with the very first intervention I made on this motion. And I think that's more than reasonable that we'll have him come as part of C-65. Thank you.
OK. you, Mr. Turnbull. So, colleagues, we now enter into debate on Mr. Turnbull's, or on the motion as amended by Mr. Turnbull. Monsieur Berthold et Madame Gautreau, je veux juste voir si ça suffit. OK, merci. Mr. Cooper? Wait. On va assurer qu'il y a quelque...
Yes, we will make sure that there is something written for you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and through you, with greatest respect to Mr. Turnbull, the effect of this amendment is to gut the motion. It guts the motion entirely. The fact is that we're going to hear from the minister on Bill C-65, otherwise more properly known as the Loser Liberal Pension Protection Act. We're going to hear from him on that, and he has a lot to answer for on that bill with respect to inserting into a so-called elections bill a clause that protects the pensions of soon-to-be defeated Liberal MPs. Canadians, as Mr. Duncan stated, and when I went home, are absolutely disgusted by this cynical and corrupt attempt to pad the pockets of soon-to-be defeated Liberal MPs. And boy, I can tell you, Canadians can't wait for a carbon tax election to throw out one of the most corrupt governments in Canadian history. But be that as it may, we're going to hear from the minister, and he's got a lot to answer for on his cynical and corrupt Loser Liberal Pension Protection Act. But we also need to probe the minister on his obstruction and the Prime Minister's obstruction of Madam Justice Hogg's inquiry, the refusal of the minister to name the 11 compromised MPs, the refusal of the minister to clarify whether any of those compromised MPs sit in Justin Trudeau's cabinet, which I think says everything Canadians need to know. And so the effect of Mr. Turnbull's motion would put us in a position where this motion wouldn't even need to be put forward, because we're going to hear from the minister on the Loser Liberal Pension Protection Act. The purpose of this motion is to hear from the minister on a much broader range of topics, and to hear him for 2 hours in a separate meeting.
Okay, before I go to the next speakers, which would be Mr. Duncan and Mr. Calkins, colleagues, this is what I'm going to do. If I don't hear by the end of Mr. Calkins' remarks that there is any movement and that we're just going to continue debate, I'm going to suspend the meeting to offer the parties an opportunity to discuss how they want to move forward. We've used up 45 minutes of the meeting. Understandably, it's legitimate, but we do have to emerge from this. Gentlemen, please. We do have to emerge from this meeting with a path forward of committee business. So there is ample opportunity for us to have conversations. As I said, Mr. Duncan, followed by Mr. Calkins. And if it looks like we're at an impasse still, I'm just going to suspend, give parties an opportunity to talk, to try to break through our impasse so that we can make a decision on this and then get to setting an agenda for committee business. We have legislated timelines of things. We have questions of privilege. We have a variety of other very important people to bring forward to talk. So obviously, it's within everybody's right to continue this conversation, but there's no point in continuing the conversation if we don't have an idea of how we're going to get to a solution. So I'm simply offering this as a preface to where we're headed. Mr. Duncan, the floor is yours.
Well, we talk about an impasse and good faith to try to come to something. Here we have a motion from Mr. Cooper, very reasonable, 2 hours to have the minister here within 14 days. And so, yeah, 45 minutes into the meeting, what's Mr. Turnbull do? Cuts it in half from 2 hours down to 1. For Canadians that aren't an expert in parliamentary hearings, 1 hour, the minister gets they get 10 minutes. They get 10 minutes for an opening statement, might get a couple of rounds. And they go and say now 14 days, they take that part out where we can kick this down the can down the road. It is not good faith what they've done with this amendment to take out the part about from 2 hours down to 1. It's not in good faith to say within 14 days to remove that completely, and they're trying to spread everything out here and distract from the real urgent issues at hand. Mr. Chair, you just kind of talked about the many outstanding issues this committee has to deal with. The minister is responsible for many of those and has a lot of questions on a wide range of topics. But again, the urgency of this, I'll repeat again, they do all these things to kick the can down the wall and obstruct and stonewall and try to look innocent and nice and just a good faith effort on their part of an amendment that's reasonable and fair. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. The minister should be here within 2 weeks for 2 hours and should be held accountable. And the urgency of all this, again, the integrity of the inquiry that Justice Hogue is undertaking right now, hearings underway, of not having access to all the documents that she deems relevant and reasonable to have, they keep brushing it off and they go, oh, we'll do C6 this or that. They could ask questions in their round, but again, the minister should be here for a full meeting to 2 hours, should be here within 2 weeks. So it's not a good faith. I'm not going to let them get away with, oh, here's a reasonable amendment to try to move this along. It's nonsense. It's further obstruction. It's further games. The minister can come for 2 hours within 2 weeks and answer the many, many outstanding questions that our committee and Canadians have for him.
Thank you very much, Mr. Duncan. Mr. Calkins, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And for the Canadians who will be watching this or are watching and listening to this committee right now, the effect that this amendment has on the main motion moved by my colleague, Mr. Cooper, will do exactly what Mr. Duncan predicts. It'll cut the amount of time that that we have to question the minister more proportionally than it will actually. It cuts the committee time in half, but it actually cuts the time that the minister has to answer by significantly more than half, because it doesn't alter the minister's time for opening remarks, which would leave a mere 15 minutes of time for questions by members of parliament rather than an hour and 50 minutes. So this is a frustrating bone of contention. It also removes the element of 14 days, which time is of the essence given the scope and mandate of the OG Commission, and there's no. I certainly don't take any comfort in any good faith, because I've seen this many times over the last 9 years, and then of course adding on the context at the end of the motion that he comes to return to Parliament and his mandate in relation to study of C-65. That means then that any question that anybody asks that's not germane or pertinent to Bill C-65 will be interrupted with points of order by, I'm assuming, Liberal MPs to try and further obstruct and provide cover and a place for the minister to hide in relation to other questions, which is why the wording in the motion by my colleague, Mr. Cooper, leaves it broad. We could ask the minister questions about legislation. We could ask the minister questions about foreign interference. We could ask the minister about the integrity of our elections institutions and election readiness by Elections Canada, but none of those questions, of course, or many of those questions would potentially be deemed out of order should we adopt this amendment. So it's frustrating, and this is the pattern. This is the pattern. I remember the conversation that we had at this committee about whether or not it was actually this committee's role to continue to pursue foreign interference, and everybody said, well, we're going to push this off. I can't recall how many times we've had document production requests for this committee, and the big argument around this table was that members of Parliament shouldn't be seeing these things because we don't have the security clearance and so on. So the solution from the government, the coalition at the time, was we're going to give this over to a commission, to a justice, who will have the security clearance to see all of the documents. And of course, that was just code for we'll only send the justice the documents that are that we think the justice should see, not the documents that we would have liked to have seen produced before this committee, before the law clerk, not the documents that even the commissioner herself and her team have suggested that they need in order to fully ensure accuracy and details necessary to carry out the mandate that the commissioner has. So it's always about weasel words, saying, you know, we're going to try and make this look like, oh, we've got nothing to hide. But it really is, we're going to duck and cover and continue to provide cover for this government, which frankly does not have the confidence of Canadians and quite ununderstandably should not have the support of this House. But it's frustrating for me to watch this continued charade where the government pretends to be acquiescing and to be open, honest, and transparent with Canadians, and then the actions and behaviors are anything but. So I will not be voting in favor of this amendment proposed by Mr. Turnbull. The minister can appear, as far as I'm concerned, within the 14 days. I would encourage my colleagues who actually care about the future of our country to actually vote against this amendment. Let's have a vote in favor of transparency. Let's have a vote in favor of democracy. Let's have a vote in favor of holding the government to account, which is what all of us ought to be doing at this table. Say no to the amendment proposed by Mr. Turnbull and get back to the main motion, for which I think should be passed in its original form by my colleague, Mr. Cooper.
Okay, colleagues. I did mention that I was ready to suspend, but only if there are folks that want to speak to this further. If there are not, then I'm going to call the question to a vote. So I've got Mr. Turnbull, Mr. Berthold, who would like to continue. So what I'm going to do is very briefly suspend, give us all a few minutes to breathe, talk to each other, and hopefully when we come back and Mr. Turnbull and Mr. Berthold have the floor, we will get some movement on this. So we are briefly suspended, colleagues. My understanding is that we made good use of our suspension. We resumed debate on the proposed, on the motion as amended. Madame Matheson, I recognize you and you have the floor.
I would like to make a sub-amendment, if I may.
I don't think it's been amended yet.
No. I
you
said,
proposed
no.
an amendment.
Just hold on. I'm going to assume you said point of order. What we're, sorry, I'll clarify if I didn't say it correctly. We are continuing debate because as soon as an amendment has been moved, we now immediately are debating the amendment.
Yeah.
So sorry, did I say motion as amended?
That's what you said.
My apologies.
Yep.
We are debating the amendment that has been proposed to amend the motion.
Thank you, Chair.
Point of order, Mr. Duncan.
But we had a speaking list before you suspended because you said, "Oh, we'll call the question." if there's
You
nobody else on the speaking
you
list."
are correct. I did have Mr. Turnbull and
Mr. Berthold.
Mr. Berthold. So you are correct, Ms. Matheson. I do apologize. I do recognize you, but I did have a speaking order. Mr. Turnbull, did you still want to go? Okay, Mr. Berthold, did you still want to go? Est-ce que tu veux? Okay. Alors.
You may proceed. You have the floor, Mr. Berthold, and then after you, Ms. Matheson will speak.
Clarification. Yeah. Sorry about that, folks.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. It will come to no surprise to you when I say that I have no trust in Mr. Turnbull's motion with regard to the presence of Minister LeBlanc here so that we can identify priorities and what he's working on at the moment. The 14-day period in the motion is absolutely essential. And I'm going to speak from experience here. On August 19th, I was at the Environment Committee, and I spoke with a few Liberals in the hallway, and they told us that the minister would be at the committee within 14 days and that we should stop insisting on having this motion, that Mr. Guilbeault would come to the committee within 14 days. Mr. Guilbeault actually appeared yesterday, September 17th, 1 month afterwards. So I have a lot of difficulty believing in the good faith of the minister to come here to this committee if he's not summoned on a specific date by this committee. So I believe that it is absolutely essential to maintain this 14-day period because I've lost all trust since I've had those hallway discussions with the Liberal Party members to the effect that ministers would appear quickly. Ministers choose when they will appear based on their political schedule and agenda rather, and not based on the priorities of Canadians and Quebecers. For me, I believe that this is unacceptable. I've already trusted the Liberals once during hallway discussions. For me, at this point, I believe that we need to keep the 14-day period within the motion. So I would like to see how the discussions will take place afterwards, but if the 14-day period disappears, we will need to insert it back in some way, shape, or form because I do not agree with the proposition as amended. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Berthold.
I appreciate all the discussion on this and the back and forth. I would agree with the Conservatives that the part about putting in as part of a study to C65 is a bit repetitive considering the minister would come for that anyway. So and I'm not sure what the cleanest way to do this is, but I think to try to bring everyone together, as I always try to do, I think that I would like to, or I could do this two ways, but I think this might work first if I bring forward a sub-amendment to the amendment. And so ultimately it would say, it would change Mr. Turnbull's moving of 1 hour back to 2. We would remove the 14 days of or we would keep the removal of the 14 days of the adoption of this motion, but then we would then remove as part of the study of C65 so that everyone can come together and move on with this and vote for it. We all get a little bit, we all give a little bit.
Okay, so colleagues, Ms. Matheson, if you can read the sub-amendment, and then colleagues, as a reminder, procedurally, once Ms. Matheson has read the sub-amendment, we will now begin a debate on that sub-amendment. Should there be no debate necessary, we will immediately go to a vote. So, Ms. Matheson, mindful of our interpreters, if you could just read it slowly, and if your team could work on getting
Rappel
a
au
copy
règlement,
of
Monsieur le
that.
Président.
Point of order, Chair.
A moment.
One moment, please.
Matheson, if your team could please also just work on getting a copy of the sub-amendment to the clerk, please. Appel au règlement, Madame Gaudreau.
On a point of order, Ms. Goudreau. I am very open to discussions usually, but now there's a lot of changes that are going on, so I cannot move further on this file so long as I do not have the translated documents before me. These are necessary.
Okay.
Heard.
Alors, juste attends un moment.
One moment, please. We're going to see if it's complete.
Have a written version of that sub-amendment yet?
We are working on it.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
So, colleagues, we're just going to briefly suspend because we do have to respect the fact that there are two official languages, and if a member of the committee is asking for their ability to undertake important parliamentary work in their language of choice, we have to honor that. So, Madame Gaudreau, c'est ça que vous voulez? J'ai bien compris.
Is that what you want, Ms. Gaudreau? Yep.
I'm just going to suspend very quickly. Lindsay, Madame Atsif, maybe speak to Madame Gaudreau just so that we can clarify. We're going to very briefly suspend here, colleagues. Colleagues, my understanding is that there have been some discussions. So, Monsieur Berthold, Monsieur Berthold, juste un moment, j'oublie où.
Mr. Belta, just one moment. Where are we at?
Got it. Okay, so we're going back to Ms. Matheson. I lost track of time for a moment. So where we left off a few moments ago was that we needed a translation piece to come into effect. Ms. Matheson, perhaps you can update the committee as to what discussions were had and where we're at.
I believe that we have provided the clerk with the full changes, and that has been distributed. It has not been distributed. Okay.
Clerk
But
will
I will
distribute, but
also
keep
read-
going, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll read it slowly to ensure proper translation, but it's fairly simple. The full motion would now read, if it was to be sub-amended, that the committee invite the Minister of Public Safety, Democratic Institutions, and Intergovernmental Affairs to appear before the committee for no less than 2 hours in relation to his priorities for the return of Parliament and his mandate.
Okay. So, c'est clair, je pense. I think
That's clear.
what's before us. Seeing, okay, Monsieur Berthold, parole à vous.
Monsieur le Président,
Chair, I'd like to table an amendment to my colleague's amendment. Or a sub-amendment, if you will.
You can't sub-amend.
Just one moment, colleagues. Mr. Turnbull on a point of order.
Chair, as far as I know, in terms of procedure, you can't sub-amend a sub-amendment.
Correct, Mr. Turnbull. Monsieur Berthold.
okay, je me suis trompé.
Mr. Belta, I'm sorry. You're right. I am mistaken. I would like to ask unanimous consent from all members to sub-amend the sub-amendment. I think that we all have a lot of work before us today, and we've talked, and we've heard that there is an urgency that the minister appear before Thanksgiving. Because of the time constraints of the UG Commission, we would suggest having a meeting with the minister in 21 days after the adoption of this motion. So that would be before Thanksgiving, and that would give the minister additional time in his schedule to make the requisite changes. So if everyone agrees, I think that that would be a reasonable sub-amendment to make. Everyone can amend this as they will, but I think we need to give Justice Ugg the opportunity to have all information before her, and the ability to ask the minister certain questions would allow Justice Ugg to do her work. So if everyone agrees, I would like to request unanimous consent to add within the 21 days following the adoption of this motion to the amendment of my colleague from the NDP. I think it's a better way of doing business.
Yeah. Okay. So, colleagues, Mr. Berthold has asked for unanimous consent. So, the first thing we have to deal with is whether or not the committee would like to grant their approval of his unanimous consent request. So, I'm looking around the room.
And what is it? What's his?
Well, it's what he. So just
May I suggest
yeah,
point of order?
just one sec, colleagues. Yeah, I know we got a lot of things flying in the air right now. So, just one sec. So, I want to clarify what's happening here. Monsieur Berthold is asking for unanimous consent to provide a sub-amendment because he does not have the ability to do it otherwise. So the first thing we have to do is decide whether or not we grant unanimous consent for Monsieur Berthold's ask for his ability to present a sub-amendment to the sub-amendment is permissible as far as the committee is concerned. Are we clear on this? So now I'm looking around the table. Are we granting Monsieur Berthold unanimous consent? I hear no. So now, Monsieur Berthold, we are now going to go back to, okay, so colleagues, where we're at now is resuming the discussion on the sub-amendment that Ms. Matheson has put forward. But I just want to intervene for a moment. This is getting, it's self-explanatory what it's getting. So, colleagues, if you have commentary that you would like to add to the sub-amendment that Ms. Matheson has proposed, now is the time to do it. If you do not, we're going to get to a vote on her sub-amendment, which would then allow us to get back into discussion and hopefully vote on the amendment, on the motion as amended. So I'm looking around the room. Does anybody want to speak to the sub-amendment? Clerk, I ask that you call the vote on whether or not the committee will accept the sub-amendment proposed by Ms. Matheson. Thank you.
Mr. Digwid.
Yes.
Madame Fortier.
Oui.
Mr. Gerritsen. Mr. Gerritsen.
Yes.
Mr. Turnbull.
En faveur.
Ms. Ramanado.
Yes.
Monsieur Berthold.
Yes.
Mr. Calkins.
Yes.
Mr. Cooper.
Yes.
Mr. Duncan. Yes. Madame Gaudreau.
Oui.
Ms. Matheson.
Yes.
Ms. Matheson?
She said
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, colleagues, so we have accepted the sub-amendment. We are now resuming debate on the motion as amended. Monsieur Berthold.
Monsieur le Président,
Chair, I would like to table another sub-amendment to the motion, as I tried to do very gleefully with and politely with all colleagues, but it didn't happen. But I would like to add to the motion that after 2 hours, in the 21 days following the adoption of this motion,
after 2 hours, within 21 days of the adoption of this motion.
Okay, colleagues, we have a new amendment put forward by Monsieur Berthold. I see that Mr. Cooper would like to speak to it. Mr. Cooper, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to speak in favor of the sub-amendment put forward by Mr. Berthold. I would note that it is consistent with the spirit of the motion, namely that the minister come to provide the committee with an update of the minister's priorities at the beginning of the fall sitting. I think it's quite reasonable for the minister to be here before Thanksgiving.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cooper. Seeing nobody else wanting to speak.
Il faut la répéter, Monsieur le Président, je l'ai.
I need to repeat it once more. I do not have this motion in front of me, and we can't vote on something that I haven't read.
Okay.
You want me to read it, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Chair?
Alors, il y a deux façons de continuer.
There are two ways forward. First, if it's okay with you, Ms. Gaudreau, you can give Mr. Berthold the floor to repeat it, and if not, we need to give Mr. Berthold and his staff a few minutes to write it in. I accept it in French, Mr. Chair. Mr. Berthold, can you repeat that? Yes, of course. So the motion would read as follows: that the committee invite the Minister of Public Safety and Intergovernmental Affairs to appear before the committee before no less than 2 hours within 21 days of the adoption of this motion in relation to his priorities for the return of Parliament and his mandate.
C'est correct, Madame Gaudreau? Okay. Colleagues, I'm looking around the room. No one is asking to speak to this. I am going to ask the clerk to call the vote on the sub-amendment proposed by Monsieur Berthold. Clerk, please.
Mr. Duguid. Madame Fortier. Mr. Gerritsen.
Yes.
Mr. Turnbull.
Yes, I support this.
Ms. Ramanado.
That's what the people elected me to do.
Oui. Monsieur Berthold.
Oui.
Mr. Calkins.
Yes.
Mr. Cooper.
Yes.
Mr. Duncan.
Yes.
Madame Gaudreau. Ms. Matheson.
Okay, colleagues, I'm looking around the room. I believe everybody understands that we have a amended motion, and we now need to either continue debate, which it doesn't look like anyone's interested in doing. We're now going to call a vote on the motion as amended. Madame Clerk?
Mr. Duguid.
Oui.
Madame Fortier.
Oui.
Mr. Garrettson. Mr. Turnbull.
Yes.
Ms. Romanado.
Oui.
Monsieur Berthold.
Oui.
Mr. Calkins.
Yes.
Mr. Cooper. Mr. Duncan. Madame Gaudreau. Ms. Matheson.
Yes.
Okay, colleagues, as my people say, Mazel Tov. We have accomplished a feat here. Mazel Tov simply means congratulations. I don't know if we have a Yiddish translator back there. So, colleagues, I am now going to suspend briefly because we're going to move in camera to discuss committee business. We know we have lots of things to do. I'm just going to allow the clerk and everybody else to kind of reset for a moment. Thank you for your cooperation. We're going to suspend. We will resume in camera and begin a conversation on committee business.